I'm Megan Baker, and this is InfluenceHer. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and it's important to us to bring attention to this issue that can happen to anyone, regardless of gender, age, race, and financial status. In the United States, millions of adults experience domestic violence every year. It has only been exacerbated by the pandemic, and awareness is needed now more than ever. It is our mission with InfluenceHer to provide a platform specifically for women to share their stories and lead impactful and sometimes difficult conversations. Our guest this week has a powerful story and a message that could not only inspire others, but save their lives. Martha Lasher-Warner is the Albany chapter leader at Parents of Murdered Children and serves as secretary for the organization at the national level. She is also the president of Family and Friends of Liza Ellen Warner Association, a nonprofit founded in 2008 in memory of her daughter, Liza. Back in October 2004, at just 29 years old, Liza was murdered by her husband after 5 years of marriage when she started divorce proceedings. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
After such unimaginable tragedy, how did you find the inner strength to become an advocate for victims and survivors?
Well, it didn't happen immediately. It took quite a while for me to want to do something in Liza's memory. First of all, I never wanted her to be forgotten. This Friday is the 17th anniversary of her murder, and it's ironic because October 1st is the beginning of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I never wanted her to be forgotten, ever. So after a year, it was suggested to me that I start the not-for-profit, and I did start the not-for-profit in her memory, and Liza was a runner, so we decided to do a 5K, and she loved fashion, so we did a fashion show also. We planned all this, and we formed a board. We had got an attorney who donated his services to us, and we started our not-for-profit. After a certain period of time, I decided that I wanted to help other victims, and I was donating the proceeds of our fundraisers to Unity House Domestic Violence Program because Liza was born in Rensselaer County and raised in Rensselaer County. So that's what we did. And after a certain period of time, I decided I wanted to go to work and help other women, and I was hired at Unity House Domestic Violence Program as a crisis case manager.
We certainly appreciate all that you do on behalf of domestic violence victims and survivors.
Thank you.
The nation has been watching the tragic story of Gabby Petito unfold. Yes. If you could sit with her parents and speak with them, what would you say?
I would try to give them as much emotional support as I could, having been through what they're going through right now. Right now, it's early, they're raw. They probably are just not able to function or deal with everyday things that they normally would have done. It's so unfortunate to have to see so many other parents go through what I've been through, that it's important that someone who's been through the experience reaches out and helps them. As a matter of fact, it was suggested to me by a friend that I try to reach out to them. But personally, I think it's too soon. They're not in a place right now where they're going to hear what I have to say, or any other parent has to say who's been through this experience. However, I would encourage them early on to get some grief counseling. I think that grief counseling helped me get through the first 3 years. I went to counseling for 3 solid years, and it did help me get through. It's such a sad case, and I just truly hope that he's found and prosecuted.
What are some of the challenges? We spoke about this a little bit earlier, but what are some of the challenges with domestic violence today, and those being prosecuted for it?
It's a challenge. Prosecution today is a challenge with the new laws, the new bail reform. I hear it just about every single day when I speak to victims over the phone. They're so frustrated, especially if there has been physical abuse, and in addition to financial and verbal and emotional abuse. But if they've been injured or hurt and are frightened, they're frightened of their abuser, and they call the police. The perpetrator gets arrested and is released. And it's extremely frightening to these victims that they're not kept in jail. And a lot of times, the shelters have been full lately since COVID. The shelters are full, and these women or men and their children, they may get an order of protection, a full stay away order, and there's so many perpetrators who do not abide by that, by the full stay away orders or orders of protection. They seem to just ignore them, and they just get rearrested and re-released. And it's sad.
What changes would you like to see made?
I would like
with that specifically.
I would really like to see abusers, depending on the level of abuse. I would like to see the judges be able to make the call, whether they get bail, whether they're kept in jail or not, depending on the level of abuse. I think if the level of abuse is very high, that they should be kept.
We spoke about the different types of abuse. It's not always physical, as you had mentioned. It can be emotional, mental, financial. What were the signs in your daughter's case?
Very subtle. They were very subtle signs. He would tell, they would have to go out for a motorcycle ride when he said they were going. They had to go to his restaurants. They had to go to the movies that he liked to see. She never was able to make a choice. To our knowledge, there was no physical abuse. We never saw any signs of physical abuse. But after the fact, I do recall her having me out to their house for dinner, and he would demean her cooking. And she was a pretty good cook. I remember one Mother's Day, she bought monkfish, and she bought it and she cleaned it herself. And it was delicious, and I just could not imagine why he was putting her cooking down, demeaning her cooking. And, and he was 12 years older than she, but he was addicted to EverQuest on the computer. And of course, I didn't know what that was, but he was addicted to EverQuest, and he was spent a lot of time on the computer. But there was no physical abuse until the month prior to her murder. She had said to him, "I'm not happy," and he asked her to give him a hug, and she did innocently go to give him a hug, and he pushed her on the bed, tied her up, and raped her. And that was the end of September. No, I'm sorry, it was the end of August. And she didn't tell me, and the mother knows when there's something wrong. And I took her to lunch, and I asked her, "What's happening? What's going on?" And she started to cry, and that's when she told me. And she said, "Please don't tell Dad and my brother." And I told her, "That's not something I can keep from your father and your brother." So I did tell them, and we encouraged her to leave the home, and she did pack up, and a few of us helped her on a Friday night, and he came home from work and didn't even know she was gone because he went right to the computer, and she called him and told him she had left.
A lot of times, victims of domestic violence feel shame and embarrassment. How do you start that conversation with someone who you may believe is being abused?
A lot of women and men think it's their fault. I was wrong. And if you watch the video on Gabby Petito when they were stopped by the police, it was her fault. She was the wrong one, the wrong party. It was her fault, and he blamed her. And that's a very typical sign of domestic abuse. I try to tell them it's not their fault. They did nothing wrong when they believe that they were in the wrong, and it's not. It's manipulation. The abuser manipulates the victim, and they work on their psyche, and they tell them over so many years' time that they are wrong. It's their fault. They're no good. They don't know how to raise a child. They don't cook well. They don't keep the house clean. Whatever is what they tell them. And they finally believe it. And they internalize that and believe that they're so wrong.
You've been able to pick up on telltale signs, like you mentioned with Gabby Petito.
Yes.
and Brian. What type of training do you feel law enforcement need to go through to just better prepare themselves and to be able to notice and recognize more when things aren't quite right?
I think law enforcement generally lack a lot of experience in domestic abuse. There was a perfect example. I think if they had been trained properly, if they had realized and looked at the signs totally that she was projecting and that he was projecting, then they would not have almost arrested her for slapping him. Yes, they did remove him from her, but he was the perpetrator. He was the abuser, and here's the end result. She has lost her life at 22 years old.
What message do you offer to anyone watching this who is in an abusive relationship?
Reach out. Reach out to your local domestic violence agency, the New York State hotline. There is a New York State hotline that is going to be has been awarded to Unity House. So Unity House staff is going to be answering the New York State domestic violence hotline. Reach out to your local domestic violence agency. Ask for help. The staff will let you know if your abuse is real and genuine, which if they're reaching out to you, it is, and they will help you. You will get the help you need. You will get counseling. Unity House offers so many services. We not only shelter, clothing, counseling. We have a youth program for women up to the age of 24. Children get special treatment. Unity House has Halloween parties for the kids. We do Christmas parties with Santa Claus for the kids. So I encourage anyone who's in a domestic abusive relationship to reach out, please. And if you have a friend you believe is going through abuse, reach out and encourage them to get help.
Martha, thank you for all that you do to advocate for women and men who are domestic violence victims, survivors. We certainly appreciate it. I know that you've been doing such a remarkable job keeping Liza's memory alive.
Thank you.
And although you had to postpone the walk, that in the run, that you're looking to start that up next year in 2022.
Yes. Hopefully. Hopefully.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure talking
Thank you.
with you. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, there are resources to get help, as Martha had mentioned. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-SAFE. The hotline is free, confidential, and available 24/7.